Thank you everybody. Yeah, I just feel like all the women who've got up tonight, so much of what they've said really corroborates my own experience and what I know to be true, and that is a really lovely thing. So thank you. So I want to talk about natural eating actually today, and there might be some of you guys in this room who are natural eaters. And I know that you weirdos exist because I'm married to one of them, and he gets up in the morning and maybe he's hungry, maybe he isn't, but generally he eats to hunger, and then he stops when he's full, and it's just a lovely, beautiful existence, isn't it, being a natural eater? Are there any natural eaters? Holla, holla, yay, good for you. Like, I'm so loving your work. And you might have other struggles in your life, but eating and feeding yourself is not your struggle, and I think it's interesting that there aren't more of you. So that also proves my theory that most of us actually are somewhere on the spectrum of having a disordered relationship with food, and that often affects our relationship with our bodies too. And I know that's true for me because if I look back on my life, I can remember from a very, very young age just having an impulse within myself, within my brain, and just within my being that moved me towards food and eating when I wasn't physically hungry, because I just didn't know what being physically hungry actually meant. And I can sort of look back at why that might be, conditioning, family situations, history, whatever. But I think it's just interesting that exists within me, that from, probably from the age of about 5 or 6, I just learned somehow that eating was a way to process my life, and eating was something that I could do to fill that uncomfortable gap between what I could hold, the amount of experience that I could hold, the amount of feeling that I could hold, and the things that I couldn't hold. And I'm really interested in how I could get what you guys have, you lovely natural eaters. I've seen my husband for many, many years eating in this really effortless and comfortable and peaceful way, and I've really wanted that my whole life, and I really feel like there was nobody out there teaching me how to do that, because I think a lot of us have talked about how diets don't work. The mainstream approach, 98% of diets fail, and most people go on to put on more weight afterwards, because you have this thing called metabolic resistance, which means that if you try and restrict the amount of food that you eat, then each time your metabolism just gets weaker and weaker and weaker. But that's what we're being offered, I think. And also, there's the thing about weight loss. I know from me, my own journey, as a child and as a teenager, because of my inclination towards using food to regulate my experience, I was very, very overweight. And in my sort of early adulthood, I lost a lot of weight through sort of excessive amounts of control and restriction, because I was buying into the eat less and move more. I was like, okay, everyone's saying eat less, move more, eat less, move more. I'm going to do that, push, 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 push. And what I found that when I'd started that eat less and move more journey, I was actually kind of on the milder end, what I experienced as the milder end of the eating disorders spectrum, in that I was kind of gently overeating on a daily basis, munching on a few things more than my body needed, but there wasn't a huge amount of violence in that behavior for me. And once I'd gone into diet mentality and restriction mentality, eat less, move more, eat less, move more, eat less, move more, actually my behavior and my thoughts around food really, really started to spiral. And what was kind of a gentle, mild form of overeating became binging and starving, became binging and purging. And that got very, very frightening, actually, for me, because I really felt that in life, generally, I was quite a competent human being. I had a job and had friends and, generally, a citizen of the world. Mm-hmm. And yet, there were days when I thought, what, the best thing that I can do today after work is go to the supermarket, buy all the things that I'm not supposed to eat, and go to my room and shut the door and eat them by myself, and then maybe release them by purging. And if my brain's telling me that that's a good idea, that's a very sort of scary place to be. And also, when you don't feel that you have the ability to not do that, you feel like you actually haven't got the control that could stop that from happening. And so I arrived in Brighton a few years ago, and I thought, right, the conventional approaches are not working for me. I need something different, but I also don't really identify with the label of an eating disorder sufferer. And so I joined FA, which is like AA, but for food addicts, so Food Addicts in Recovery Anonymous. And that was a really, really interesting part of my journey. I was there for 5 months. I'm not in FA anymore, which is probably good actually because it's supposed to be anonymous. So it would be that would be failing like the first rule of FA. Don't say that you're in FA. But yeah, I was in FA for 5 months, and for my experience was just like you just took away my drug. My drug from one day to the next was just taken from me. And I remember sort of having the first call with my sponsor, 6 a.m. and just saying, so yeah, I was thinking about this, and she was just like, no, this is what you're going to eat. You're going to have 1 ounce of this, and 8 ounces of this, and 6 ounces of this, and that will be it. And then at lunch you'll have this, and at dinner you'll have this, and this is what you will eat. And I was like, oh no, but I thought I was going to maybe have this. And so, oh, and we were going to go to the pub for lunch, and she was like, no, this is what you are going to have, because this is how FA works. Like, how can you be abstinent from food? Like, how does that work? I mean, with alcohol, it's pretty clear. You drink or you don't drink alcohol. But with food, how do you become abstinent? And so there's very, very strict guidelines in the group that I was in the FA group that I was in. And for 5 months, for me, that really peeled away all the layers, and it showed me very, very clearly all the ways that I used food to regulate my own experience. And it was an unraveling of my entire humanity, really, in ways that were hugely beneficial and in ways that felt really, really very vulnerable. But I think one of the biggest lessons I took from that was the power of stimulating food versus the healing potential of non-stimulating food. And in the community that I run now, called I Eat What I Need, we don't talk about good or bad food or healthy food or unhealthy food. In fact, we never tell anyone how or what to eat. And I don't want anyone ever to tell me how or what to eat. I don't want anyone to ever weigh me either. But I have to recognize that my own life experience corroborates that although I can't stay 100% abstinent from processed foods and flour and sugar, which is how in FA we do things, or they did things, but I know from my own experience that generally I feel safer around unstimulating foods, so whole, not processed foods. And I think if we're going to recognize that diet culture has a huge part to play in the disorder that we're experiencing now in our relationship with food, I think we also need to recognize that the food environment in itself is also playing a huge role in the way that we feel with food, because this food is designed to create addiction. They have engineers and scientists who are creating foods that will hit the bliss point on your tongue in the most intensely pleasurable way, so that your brain is going to get hijacked. Your poor little belly down here is never going to have a voice that's loud enough to shout down these kinds of really massively processed foods. And that's not actually a very popular opinion at the moment, because in a lot of the body positive communities and the fat activist communities that I have a voice in, because I really, really love the message of kind of removing the weight question from the work, because weight is not health. I think that's really important to state that. Your weight does not determine your health. And if you look at things, some research done by people called Health at Every Size, they corroborate that. But at the same time, the mainstream food environment that we live in is also not promoting the kind of mental health that I know that I need to keep myself safe. And so kind of 5 months down the road, I'd left FA. I'd sort of accepted that, to be honest, I need to eat unstimulating whole, non-processed foods, mostly if I'm going to stay well in body and mind. And I'm also going to have to steer clear of diet culture. So what is left for me? What is left? And what is left became a community called I Eat What I Need. And notice it's I eat what I need. And if I determine that to process my experience I need to binge, then that's mine to own. And it's not for me to tell anybody else how to eat or how to be or how to live. And it's a process of awareness, I would say. For me, this first step is about noticing your experience and noticing how how your relationship with food and body plays out in your life, and how perhaps that is influenced by the different culture and the conditioning and the messages that you're getting from your history, from your family, from the media. The beliefs that we have around food and our bodies that maybe we could question and we could turn them around possibly. Something that also really, really has stuck with me is the power of gentleness in this process of recovery, really. And for a long time I really thought that the best way that I could keep myself on the straight and narrow, so eating less, moving more, keep my weight down, you know, be healthy, whatever, was to keep my inner critic very strong. So get up off that sofa, you know, and go out for that run, and just keep, you know, this very judgmental and very self-critical voice. I really thought that that was keeping me safe. And I didn't allow permission for the loving voice and the gentle voice to come in and take over, because I thought that that meant that I would just lie on the sofa all day and eat crap. And it turns out that actually, from my own then deepening my practice in sort of Buddhist teachings and doing a bit of loving kindness, realizing that, you know what, there's a real strength to gentleness, and it calms our nervous systems, and it puts us in a receptive state where new ideas, new concepts, new beliefs, new behaviours can actually settle within us and become a more sustainable part of who we are and how we live in the world. And the final thing that I think a lot of the other women have corroborated today is the importance of embodiment. And my little cards I've left here are part of the work that I do with I Eat What I Need includes something that I've called deeply gentle yoga. And for me, I would say the number one thing that has changed my life in the past few years has been lying down on the floor in my living room, rolling around and breathing. And I would say if there's one thing that you could do for your well-being for the next 3 or 4 years, that'll keep you really, really busy. And you don't need any special clothes or a mat or anything to do this. You don't need a teacher. You don't need an app. You don't need an iPod. You don't need anything. You just need to lie on the floor, roll around, and breathe. And that's the kind of thing that I think takes what we know to be true on a cognitive level deep into our cells, so that we can move from a new place where eating in accordance with our natural eater, which I believe belongs in the belly. Here, this is where the digestion happens. If we can start to listen to the new boss in town, my new boss in town is my belly, and I can't quite believe what it feels like to be living in the world and eating in the world from this space, from this deep space that I just didn't know was available to me. And I've learnt that, do you know what, nobody else can do this work for me. No one else can rewire my brain. No one else can connect my belly and my brain together through my vagus nerve. I've got to go inside and do that. And there's no magic cure, but rolling around on the floor, breathing and feeling these internal spaces will do that for you. So just to finish, I'd just like you to put your hands on your belly, if you feel comfortable doing that. Close your eyes for a second. Breathe. Feel the touch of your belly and your hand. And just take your awareness inside this internal space. This liquid space at the center of your being. And just notice how it feels. Can you feel anything pushing up against your abdominal wall? That's the front of your belly. Can you feel any pockets of tightness, softness? Does it feel full or empty or somewhere comfortably in between? And this space, this is the home of your natural eater. I'd like to say to you, welcome home. Thank you.